Mem Beis. Are we? No. Daf Mem Aleph. We're at Daf Mem Aleph. 5 lines from the top. Hoyu lefonav minin harba. We learned in the Mishnah about a person that has minin harba, different kinds of foods in front of him, and he wants to make a bracha. What does he make the bracha on? So you're going to make one bracha, and then with that bracha you're going to be yaitze and for the other things that are there on the table. Let's see. So there's a machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanon in the Mishnah, and the Chachamim in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda says the preference is to make on the shiva haminim, and the Chachamim say make the bracha on whatever you like most, and then you yaitze with everything. Let's see. Omar Ula explains pshat in the Mishnah. Machlokes. When are they arguing? What's the case of their argument? When you have a few items in front of you that have the same bracha, right? For example, Rashi says you have in front of you an apple and an olive. They're both a bracha of ha'etz. The only thing is the olive is from the shiva haminim and the apple is not from the shiva haminim. But you don't have to make 2 brachas. You're going to be making one bracha of ha'etz. The only question is, should you make the ha'etz on the apple or should you make the ha'etz on the olive? That's the case that they're arguing. In a case where you're going to be making one bracha. So which one should you make that one bracha on? The Rabbi Yehuda saw Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is min shiva adif. That the shiva haminim takes precedence, and you have to make the bracha on the shiva haminim. Rabbanan savri min chaviv adif. No, the chaviv, what you like, that's more important, and that's what you make the bracha on. Aval, however, b'she'ein b'chesein shavos, if you have 2 foods in front of you and they don't have the same bracha, for example, you have a vegetable that's adama, and you have even from the shiva haminim in front of you that's ha'etz. Divrei HaKoil, everybody would agree that you have to make 2 separate brachas, and mevarach al zeh, v'chayzer and mevarach al zeh. You make one bracha on one, and you make another bracha on the other, and according to Ula, everybody would agree that the order doesn't matter. You make the bracha however you want. You have to make 2 brachas. The Mishnah was only talking about when you're making one bracha. When you're making one bracha, then they argue what should that one bracha be on. But if you're making 2 brachas, so then mevarach al zeh, v'chayzer and mevarach al zeh. You make on one, and then you make on the other. Eisvei, the Gemara asks a question from a Braisa. It clearly says not so. A person has in front of him a radish and an olive. So over there it says, the first opinion, you make a bracha on the radish. And once you made the bracha on the radish, so now, what's the bracha on the radish? Hadama. Once you made the bracha hadama, so now paiteres hazayis, you don't have to make the ha'etz on the olive anymore. We said earlier that hadama b'di'eved could be mitzi the bracha of ha'etz. So this brayso seems to be saying that even in a case when you have a radish and an olive in front of you, according to the Chachamim, if you like the radish better than the olive, make the bracha on the radish, one bracha, and that bracha of hadama will cover the bracha of the olive. So how can we say that this is only if there are 2 things that are the same bracha, like an olive and an apple? And for the Gemara, that Braisa must be speaking about a totally different case. You know what that Braisa is speaking about? When his entire focus, why is he eating? He wants to eat the radish. As Rashi explains over here, his person is interested in eating radish. He's not really interested in eating something else along with it. Elamai, what's happening over here? Together with the radish, he also eats an olive in order to blunt the sharpness of the radish. That's it. So therefore, together with the radish, he's also chewing from the olive to help along while he eats the radish. But his main focus is to eat the radish. What's the law? What's the halacha b'negei to ikar and tafel? If you eat a secondary food, so you don't make a bracha on the secondary food. People think that this is only regarding washing when you eat hamaitzi and you're eating everything else in a suda, but it's not only regarding hamaitzi, as we'll see later. This is later in the Mishnah on Daf Mem Daled. We'll see all the details there. But just as it is with hamaitzi and everything else in the suda, which is tafel to the bread, you don't make a bracha on anything else. The bracha you make just on hamaitzi. The same thing is also in this case when a person is eating the radish and he's only eating the olive to take away the sharpness of the tznayin of the radish. You don't make any bracha b'chlal on the zayis, and therefore it says over you make the bracha on the tznayin and you don't make any bracha on the olive. Frag the Gemara, if this is the case, ein seifa. What's the next part of this Braisa? Rabbi Yehuda argued and said, Mevarach al azayis. You do make a bracha on the olive, shazayis mimin shiva, since the olive is from the shiva haminim. So the question now is, does Rabbi Yehuda disagree to this rule that we just said, that whatever is the ikir, that's what you make the bracha on, and the secondary food, you don't make a bracha on it at all? So we learned this in the Mishnah. Kol shu ikir v'imay tfeila. Anytime you have a primary food and then along with it comes a secondary food, mevarach ala ikir u'paiter es atfeila. You only make the bracha on the ikr food, and on the secondary food you don't make the bracha at all. So does Rabbi Yehuda disagree with this rule, which seems to be a universally accepted rule? So the Gemara says, "V'chi taimid lesle." Yeah, perhaps Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with this Mishnah. He could disagree, but for Tanya, we learned befedish in the Braise. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Im machmas tsnaim ba'azayis." If his purpose, the only reason he's eating the olive is for the radish itself, and the main focus, the primary food is the radish, then mevarach al tznain u'paiter es hazayis. Then the bracha will be of hadama on the radish, and you're exempt of making a bracha on the olive. So we clearly see that Rabbi Yehuda agrees. So in the brayso that we quoted before, if we're going to say that in the Reisha, when he's eating the radish and the olive, it was talking about a case that the radish was the primary and the olive is secondary, why did Rabbi Yehuda argue? So therefore the Gemara says, La'olam b'tznoir ikir askinan. We're going to have to say that even though the interpretation we said before is true, that the Reisha is speaking about a case where the radish is the primary food, but in the continuation of the Braisa there's something missing. We're going to have to add words to the Braisa here to make it make sense. But the argument of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanon, when are they arguing? B'milsachriti. They're arguing about a different case, not the case where the primary food is the radish and the secondary food is the olive. And milsachriti, as we'll see in a moment, will be basically the machlokes that Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan speak about in the Mishnah. V'chasuri mechsere. It's missing in this Braisa. V'hachi ketani, and this is the way you have to learn this Braisa. You have in front of you a radish and an olive. You can make the bracha on the radish, and you're exempt of a bracha on the olive. When is that the din? If the tznain, if your main focus of eating is you want to eat the radish, and the olive is secondary. And everybody agrees to that. If the radish is not your main food right now, everybody agrees you have to make two separate brachas. You have to make a bracha on the radish and you have to make a bracha on the olive. And according to the Tana, and you can make a bracha on either one you wish. Whatever you like, you make the bracha on first. Now the Braisa continues. Shnei minin ba'alme shebirchesei and shavais. If you have two minim that have the same bracha, which is going back to the case we said before is the case of our Mishnah, like an olive and an apple. What's going to be the din then? So mevarach aleizem and sheyirtze. The Tana Kama says you make the bracha on whatever you like first. Whatever is chaviv to you, that's what you make the bracha on, and then you don't have to make the bracha. If you make the bracha on the appellates, you don't have to make the bracha on the shiva haminim. Rabbi Yehuda says, Mevarach al azayis, shahazayis mimin shiva. You make the bracha on the olive, you always make the bracha on the olive first, which is from the shiva haminim. Even if you like the apple more, you still make the bracha on the olive because it's from the shiva haminim. So of course, lahalacha lemaisa, we paskin like the chachamim, not like Rabbi Yehuda. So if you have shiva haminim in front of you, and you have also an apple, an orange, or anything else, if you don't have especially chavivus of one more than the other, you're supposed to be maktim, the shiva haminim. You make the bracha, not only maktim. You make the bracha on the shiva haminim, and then you don't make any bracha on the apple or the orange. But if you have a chavivus specifically to an apple more than any of the shiva haminim that it's in front of you, so then you make the bracha on the apple, and then you don't have to make a bracha on the shiva haminim. That's the halacha brought in the Alter Rebbe and say the Brachos Hanenim.
And if you have shiva haminim by priyadama?
That's the next Gemara. Let's see inside. Now the Gemara says regarding this exact machlokes of Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanon that we just discussed, and we explained their machlokes. So Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha also argued about how to understand the machlokes of Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanon. One of them said machlokes b'shel birchesei and shavos. One of them said that when are they arguing, like we explained before, when you have an apple and an olive, the same bracha. The Rabbi Yehuda Sava min shivadif. Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is shivas haminim is always more important, and regardless of what you like, you always have to make the bracha on the shivas haminim. Rabbanan sabri min chavevadif. Rabbanan say whatever you like, that's what you make the bracha on first, and then you don't have to make the bracha at all on the shivas haminim. If they don't have the same bracha, there are two separate brachas here, and if it's two separate brachas, you make the bracha on whatever you like. You can make the bracha on the hadama first, and then you make the bracha on the shivas haminim. Everybody would agree, even Rabbi Yehuda. Right, but that's only b'diavad. So Rashi Bavaran is that here. Rashi says that the whole thing that Adama is mitzi the ha'etz is only if a person forgot, and when he wanted to eat an apple, said a hadama, so then it's b'diavad mitzi. But if you have a cucumber and an apple, and you made the bracha adama on the cucumber, you have to make a bracha on the apple that you eat afterwards. It's not mitzi it. It's only if you made the hadama on the apple b'diavad. That's what Rashi explains here. Chadamar, but now another interpretation in the machlokes of Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan is even if you have two items in front of you that do not have the same bracha, like an apple or let's not take an apple, let's take one of the shivas haminim. You have an olive together with a cucumber, so the cucumber is hadamah, it's not b'cheseim shavais, nami machlokes. There's also an argument in this case. What do you do over here? So the Gemara clarifies now, what is the argument? Until now, our assumption was, the way we understood the Mishnah is, he's got to be making only one bracha. The question is, what should you make the bracha on the apple or the olive? But now that we're saying that you have an olive and a cucumber, for example, so you're making two brachas. So if you're making two brachas, so what are they arguing about? So the one that explains that you have an apple and an olive, the same bracha, so machlokes shapir. So we understand what the machlokes is. I'm going to be making one bracha. What should I make the bracha on? On the apple or the olive? If it's two things, if it's an olive and a cucumber, so you're making two different brachas. So they're arguing. You're saying that they're arguing in a case where it's two different brachas, but by my pligi, what is the argument? Everybody would agree that you have to make two separate brachas, Adam and Ha'etz. So the Gemara explains, if that's what the case is, the argument is about which one should you make the bracha on first. That's what the argument is. Rabbi Yehuda says that the shivas haminim, the olive, the bracha of ha'etz on the olive will always come before the hadam on the cucumber. Even if you like the cucumber better, but you should make the bracha on the olive by the pri ha'etz. Mashenk and the Rabbanan say, if you like the cucumber better, make the bracha hadama on the cucumber before you make the bracha on the olive. And again, that's the halacha that we paskin like according to the Rabbanan. That even if the hadama, which is l'chayra a less chashav bracha, then the bracha of the shivas haminim, the bracha of ha'etz, yet if you like the cucumber better, you make the bracha on the cucumber before you make the bracha on the olive. But the Rabbana will agree though, if a person has no preference and you have both of them in front of you, that you should make the bracha of ha'etz on the shivas haminim first. Sagt the Gemara weiter, no, so just read that, sorry, lahakta. The Amar Rav Yosef, this is based on what Rav Yosef said, v'teimer Rav Yitzchak. And others say that Rabbi Yitzchak is the one that said this. Not only is it that the shivas haminim are more important, but we could see in the pasuk itself that the pasuk enumerates the shivas haminim in a specific order. And the reason is because what comes first in the pasuk is more chashiv, what comes later in the pasuk is less chashiv. So from this statement that we're about to read from Rav Yosef, we see that just as it is regarding the shivas haminim itself, that there's a priority of one over the other, the same is also true that all the shivas haminim have a priority over the rest of fruits or even vegetables that are not of the shivas haminim, that you make the bracha on the shivas haminim first. So what's the order in the pasuk? Again, whatever comes first in the pasuk is first to make a bracha. Shenema eretz chita sa'ira gefen te'ena rimain eretz zeis shemen advash. So you have wheat, barley, and grapes, figs, and the pomegranate, and then the last two are the olives and the shemen. The dvash is the dates, the honey that comes from dates. So if you have a variety of these shivas haminim in front of you, you make the bracha first on what comes in the pasuk first. Chlige der Rab Chanan, now the Gemara says, this statement of Rav Yosef or Rav Yitzchak argue on the way Rab Chanan understood why the Torah puts it in this order. The Torah tells you the shiva haminim specifically in this order. Why did it put it in this order? Rav Yosef says it's precise. The Torah wants to teach me something about the order. Rab Chanan held no. When the Torah puts it in this order, it wasn't teaching you about the Seder of Brachos. The Amar Rab Chanan, because Rab Chanan says, Kol ha-pasuk kuloi l'shiyura nemar. This entire pasuk, when it mentions these special fruits that Eretz Yisrael was benched with, it's mentioning it also to tell me that each one of these fruit sizes is a different size that's relevant for a shear, for the amount that's important for a measurement for certain things, as we'll see in a moment. Okay, so the way Rashi explains this is, since according to Rab Chanan, this is just referring to measurements, sizes regarding different halachas. When it comes to halachas of Torah, you can't say one halacha is more important than another halacha. They're all equal. It's all applies in different cases, and they're all equal. So therefore, the order in the pasuk is not in the order of importance. It's just the order of different of different halachas, of the measurements, without any preference of one over the other. So what are these halachas that it replies to? What are the measurements? So he explains as follows. Nema chita. Okay. Kala pasuk kula l'shiyura nema. Chita. The size of a chita is what? The Tnan, we learned in the Mishnah, someone that enters into a house that has a tzaras on it. So if you enter into such a house, you become tamei. Now there's two different ways how a person may have entered into this house. He enters into the house and he's holding things in his hands. He's holding any item in his hands. He's holding his clothing in his hands. So he becomes immediately tamei. The halach is you enter into a house that has a tzaras in it, you become immediately tamei, and whatever you're holding in your hands, like yourself, becomes immediately tamei. Okay, so that's what it says here. V'keilov al ksefov. If you have clothing that you're not wearing, but you have it on your shoulders, you're holding it on your shoulders, or sandalov, tabaisa b'yadov, you're holding shoes in your hands, you're holding your rings in your hands, you're not wearing them. Hu v'hein tmei miyad. They become immediately tamei. They're exposed to the tamei and immediately become tamei. However, if he's wearing his garments, Kalov, he's wearing his garments, V'sandalov beraglov, he's wearing his shoes, V'tabaisov betzbaisov, or he's wearing his rings, Ho tamei miyad. Since he is entering, he's walking into the room. So he is an entity for himself coming into the room, he's tamei immediately. But the clothing that he's wearing is a secondary thing that's coming along with him that he's wearing. So therefore, over there, the tumah doesn't affect the secondary thing, the clothing that's coming along with him immediately. V'hein tahayrin, and therefore they are tahir at sheyishe b'chdei achilas pras, until he stays there long enough for a period of time of k'dei achilas pras, which I'll explain in a moment, and only then does he become tamei. So if he's holding the clothing in his hands and the clothing are not right now serving as a garment that he's wearing, the clothing or the ring or the shoes are not considered to be secondary to the person because he's holding them separately in his hands as an item. So just as he entered, they entered as well, and therefore they both become tamei immediately. But if the clothing that he's wearing are being worn on him, so then the clothing is secondary to the person, and therefore the clothing do not become tamei immediately like the person himself. This entire thing is based on psukim. He becomes tamei right away, and not the clothing. It's based on psukim, but that's the halacha. Now, what's the shear? How long does the person have to linger in this house so that even the clothing that he's wearing should become tamei? So, as we said, b'chdei achilas pras. What's k'dei achilas pras? This is a shear that's used very, very often, and the pshat on this shear, Rashi here says, it's a loaf of bread that is a size to use for 2 meals. Enough bread for 2 meals. So kedei achilas pras means half of that loaf, which is basically the amount of bread used for 1 meal. Okay, and which type of bread though is this? Pas chitin. It's specifically a bread which is made out of wheat. V'loi pas ha'ayrin, and not bread which is made out of barley. So Rashi says that to eat bread made out of wheat, it's easier to eat and you eat it quicker than bread made from barley. And then the Braisa adds another detail. Meisev v'oichlon belifton. And we're talking about a person that's eating this wheat bread reclining and he's eating it together with relish. And Rashi explains what the Gemara means to say over here is, if a person is eating bread but he's not reclining and he's not in a comfortable position, so it takes him longer to eat the bread because he's busy and occupied with other things. Like when a person is in a Suda and he's doing other things at the same time, so you're not eating it quickly. When a person is sitting comfortable, so he's eating constantly, and therefore the food that he's eating is quicker. This is the shear of Kedei Achilas Pras. Practically speaking today, it's a big machlekes and paiskim how long that is. It varies anywhere between 3 to 8 or even 9 minutes. Yeah. So this is negeya to many halachas. One of the places that is the most negeya is Achilas Matzah, that you're supposed to eat the first kezayis b'chdei Achilas Pras. So the Welt is mahad to eat it as quick as possible, but there's bigger shiurim that you can eat it and it's still Kedei Achilas Pras. Okay. So that's the first shear of chitin. When the Torah says chita, refers to the shear of kedei achilas pras. Now se'ira, the Torah writes barley. What is that a shear for? The Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, etzem, a bone of a dead body, kise'ira, if it's the size of a barley, mitame. If you come in contact with it, it makes you tame. B'magel, b'masa, whether you touch it, or even if you're not touching it, but a b'masa, if you're carrying it. That's the shear of a barley. But if it's so small, this bone, it's not metame when you're under the same tent as this little bone. To be metame in an oil, it has to be there's a larger size, which the Gemara doesn't bring here. Geffen. What's the shear of grapes? What is that used for? Vineyard. Kidei revius yayin lenazir. This is the shear of a revius wine for a nazir. When it comes to a nazir may not eat any, not only wine, but any grapes, the seeds of grapes, the peels of grapes, right? What's the shear? How much grapes is he not allowed to eat? So the shear is a revius. This is an unusual thing. Usually when it comes to liquid, we use the shear of revius. When it comes to solids, we don't use the shear of revius. By a nazir, the shear of him that he's not allowed to eat of any of the grapes, even the solids, the pits, and so on, is also the shear of a revius. How do you measure the shear of a revius for the solids of a grape, whether it's the grape or the seeds or the pits? The answer is if you have a cup of revius of wine in it, and if you place in a grape inside of it, and a revius of wine spills out from that cup after you place the grape in the cup, so now you know that the grape is large enough that it's also for you to eat. If you put in a grape that's small and the share of liquid of wine that comes out is less than a revius, so then you know that the grape is small enough that he's not chayiv if he eats it. Okay, that's the concept. That's how you use this liquid shear of a revius for a solid of a grape. Now the thing is, there's an interesting nature over here, though. If you're going to take a grape and put it into a cup, and then the water overflows, the water will overflow much quicker than wine. Wine, the liquid of wine has a thicker consistency, and therefore it won't flow over as quickly. The edges will hold it back from flowing over quicker than water. So therefore by wine...
Less quick.
Huh?
By wine, less quick.
By wine, less quick. Okay, that's what I meant to say, yeah? So therefore, when you put in something into the cup, and the wine flows over, you're going to have to put in a drop more to get it to flow over than if it's water. So what we're saying over here is the shear of a revius is not regarding a revius of water where it will flow over quicker and therefore it'll be a smaller shear, but the shear is for the revius to get the revius of wine to flow over, and that will be a tiny drop more, just a little bit more. So that's the geffen. The Mishnah said, the pasuk said geffen to say that the revius is from the revius of yayin. Ta'enam, what's the shear of a fig used for? Kegreigeris loitzas Shabbos. The halacha of a person that's Maitzi and Shabbos carries from the Rishus HaYachid to the Rishus HaRabim. What's the minimum size that you chayiv for? If what you carried is the size of a fig. Rimain, the shear of Rimain, what is that shear for? A pomegranate. Kedetnan, as we learned the halacha regarding a vessel that became tamei. So the halacha regarding any vessel that becomes tamei is that if the vessel gets broken or gets a hole in it and you have no use of it anymore, so because it's not a vessel that it's used, so the tumah is gone. So how large of a hole does it have to be in order that it should be tahor? So it says in the Mishnah, Kol keli balabatim, the kelim that are used by balabatim, private owners, shiyudan kirimain. The size is, if your keli has a hole the size of a pomegranate, so then, based on the top, so then the shear is a rimain, the size of a rimain. There's another halacha b'negeh to the size of a person that is selling kalim. Over there, the shear is much smaller because you're not going to sell something which has a hole in it. But for a balabas that has a hole in it, even your dishes for a private individual that has a hole in it, you still may continue to use it for something else. As Rashi describes over here, that if it has a hole, so you use it for larger things. If it has even a bigger hole, you use it for larger items. But a rimain is quite large. Once it has a hole like a rimain, so then you don't use it anymore, and therefore it becomes tar. Eretz zeis shemen. Amar Rabbi Yosef bar Rab Chanina. Rabbi Yosef bar Rab Chanina said, Eretz shakol shiurea kezeisim. The next thing in the pasuk is that it says an olive. So it says that this is a land that all of the shiurim are basically the kezayis. Kezayis is the most common shear that's used regarding eating, to be a mitzvah, to eat matzah, or for any yisurim, when you chayiv, if you ate chaylev or whatever it is, it's always a kezayis. Kezayis is the most basic shear for eating any foods that we always use. So the Gemara, however, questions this statement that it says here, kol shiura? Is it really, kezayis is the only shear that for everything? So could you say so? Didn't we just say that there are other shiurim? Kezayis is not the only shear. Ella, so you have to amend that and say, Eretz sheroiv shiureh kezeisim. Most of the shiurim follow the size of an olive, of a kezayis, so that's the most common shear that we use. What's the last thing it said in the pasuk? Dvash, the honey that comes from dates. Where is the relevance of the size of a date? Kekaiseves hagasa b'yom kippurim. On Yom Kippur, the minimum size that a person is chayav for eating on Yom Kippur is the size of a big date. And the reason for that is because on Yom Kippur it's not just about eating. On Yom Kippur it says v'nisim is nafshesechem. You should inflict your soul. So even if you eat a kezayis, you still you still v'nisim is nafshesechem. But if you eat the size of a kekaiseves hagasa, of a big date, then you're not inflicting your soul anymore. So these are all the shiurim that the pasuk here says.
What does it mean, dvash? Literally, that's the bracha you make on dvash? No.
On the honey itself?
Yeah.
No. The bracha, as we learned before, the dvash is zeya balma. You don't make the bracha of eitz b'chlal on the honey. Correct.
Does it say dvash in the pasuk?
The Torah wrote dvash because I guess the main benefit of a date is the honey that comes out of the date.
And what's the seder? What does it have to do? The shear has to do with the seder?
No. That's the whole point. The seder, according to Rab Chanan's opinion, that it goes on the shiurim, the seder is irrelevant. That's exactly what he's trying to say. He argues on Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef said that the seder is relevant, and Rab Chanan says these are shiurei Torah. These are various halachas which with no importance of one over the other, and therefore the seder in the pasuk is befedish, not a seder. And if you have a variety of shivas haminim in front of you, you make a bracha ha'etz on any of the shivas haminim you want. Now the other opinion, going back to the opinion of Rav Yosef, does he not agree to what it says here, that these are the shiurim that are hinted in the pasuk? So he explains, Hani shiurim behedye miksivi. These shiurim that he just pointed out, and all of these shivas amina that are written there in the pasuk, do these shiurim, these measurements say clearly in the pasuk? Doesn't say clearly in the pasuk. Ela medarabanan. All of these shiurim are medarabanan. Ukra asmachta ba'alma. The fact that he shows that the pasuk over here says the various shiurim is just an asmachta. He's relying it on the pasuk, but that's not what the simple pshat of the pasuk is. When it says there in the Gemara Midrabanan, there are those that change the girsa and say hilchasanino, which means that it's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai, because all these shiurim are not just Midrabanan; they're more than Midrabanan. They're handed down as a Messiah from Moshe Misinai, the shiur of a kezayis, and all of these shiurim are halacha l'Moshe Misinai. But it's not what the simple pshat of the pasuk is about. It's just a remez in the pasuk. It's an asmachta. So therefore he says, you have to taish the pasuk in its simple pshat. It's talking about these shivas haminim, and the pasuk says it in the order of importance, and therefore that's relevant for the brachos, what comes first and what comes next. Now the Gemara shares a story that happened. Rav Chisda and Rav Nuna hava yasvo besudasa. Rav Chisda and Rav Nuna was sitting together by a suda. So it was brought in front of them dates and pomegranates. So what says in the pasuk first? Dates or pomegranates? Dates, it says in the pasuk last. It's the seventh thing in the pasuk. The haminim says number 5, I believe. So what happened over here? Shakla Rav Amnuna barach hatamri bereisha. Rav Amnuna went and took the date and made the bracha on the date first before the pomegranate. Amalei Rav Chisda, so Rav Chisda said to him, do you not agree to what was said in the name of Rav Yosef or Rav Yitzchak, that Kol HaMuktim b'Pasik Zeh Kedem LeBracha? Whatever says earlier in the Pasik is before, takes precedent for the bracha. What's the pshat? So why did you make the bracha on the date first? Amalei, he answered him, no, Zeh, the date, Sheni La'aretz, comes the second after the word Aretz. When you look into the pasuk, so what does it say? It says, Eretz, Chita, Sa'ira, Gefen, Te'ena, V'rimain, but then it says Eretz again. Eretz, Zeis Shaman Udvash. So why did the Torah repeat the word Eretz again? The Torah repeated the word Eretz again to tell me that the Zeis Shaman, the olive, and the date are more important if they come closer to the word Eretz. So therefore the Tamar, the date, is Sheni L'Aretz. It comes second after the second time the Torah writes the word Eretz. V'zeh Chamishi L'Aretz. On the other hand, the Rima in the pomegranate, in the Pasuk it says it first, but it comes as number 5 after the first time it writes Eretz. So therefore you go according to what's closer to the word Eretz. Okay, one second. But Taisus explains a very interesting thing. How about if you have a fruit that's second to the first eretz, which is the barley, sa'ira, and you have the tamar, which is second to the second eretz. So l'chayra, they're equal. So there Taisus says, then you're going to go according to what comes first in the pasuk. Okay, so the Torah still wrote that first to say that it would come first. But if you have the tamar, which is second to the second eretz, and the rimayim, the pomegranate, which is fifth to the first eretz, so then the tamar that comes second in the pasuk comes first. And this is the halacha that's brought in Shulchan Aruch as well. Now the Gemara concludes, Omar Lei. So when Rav Chisda heard this, he said to Rav Amnuna, Man yovlo nagri de parzala. Who would give us steel legs, v'nishmeinach, and we could stand and not get tired, and we can hear you teaching us Torah. He was so impressed by this chiddush that he said, that there's at times edits in the pasuk that he says, unbelievable. He said, we should always stand and hear your words of Torah. So here I want to share a beautiful vart that the Rebbe said in this Gemara. I mean, because the question is, why does the Torah write twice edits? It could have set up the order without writing twice edits in a way that we should understand what the order of priorities in the pasuk is. Why does the Torah write it in this order? So the Rebbe explains up Beruchnius and Avedis Hashem that the order of the pasuk is very specific. The Torah starts with Chita, which is the
main sustenance.
The main sustenance of the person. Yeah. What's Chita? That's Maichel Adam. Maichel Adam, a human being, eats Chita. Then comes Sa'ira. What's Sa'ira? Maichel Behema. Behemoths eat barley. What does that refer to? The first Aveda is with the Nefesh Elokis. That's the beginning of a person's Aveda. Then you have to take that Aveda a step further and bring it into your Nefesh HaBahamis. And then from the Nefesh HaBahamis you go to Gefen. What's Gefen? When a person has to deal with his Nefesh HaBahamis, it doesn't always flow so easily. So when it comes to the Nefesh HaBahamis, it's not so simple. Sometimes you have to fight. So the next Aveda is that you should all deal with your Nefesh HaBahamis, but it should be done with simcha, with joy. Shouldn't be done with a fight and with painfulness. Then what's the next thing in the pasuk? After Gefen comes Te'ena. What did we learn before in Te'ena? Blat before. Regarding Chet Eitzadas, the Te'ena is what the Eibishter made the levushim, the garment for Adam Rishon. So a person should take the effect of his Aveda to affect him externally, in Machshavet Dibur Maisa, to bring it out a step further. And then the next thing is the Rimain. The Rimain refers to the mitzvahs that a person does, Malaya mitzvahs Kerimain, which refers to the fact that the person brings his ashpar from his nefesh elokis to his nefesh habahamis, then to his levushim, and even out a step further into the objects of the world that he does a mitzvah with. That's the first part of the pasuk. Then it says again eretz. The reason why it says again eretz is because this is referring to a different inyan and aveda. This is referring to the Yidden Bizman HaGolus. And Yidden Bizman HaGolus is a new Aveda of Eretz. Eretz B'chlal refers to the Aveda, the Charisha V'Zriya, that a person has to plow and work in the field. And the Eretz, the second thing is the Aveda in Golus, where you begin with the Zayis. The Zayis is bitter. But the Aveda of the bitterness in Golus, when you crush that olive, Maitzi Shamnai, you have the olive, the oil that comes out, which refers to the Pnimius HaTeira, the deepest secrets of Teira come out, Dafka in Golus. And then the dvash, which is also similar, you take the date, and you take out the honey from it. Dvash v'cholav tachas l'shaynich. Honey also refers to pnimiyus hatayra. So therefore, the Torah says twice eretz. One is the eretz, the regular avodah in Eretz Yisrael, which has that seder, and then there's the second eretz, which is the avodah b'zman hagolus, the second kind of avodah. And what the pasuk is being machadish is when you have the second eretz, the avodah in the second in golus, the dvash and the zayis, which are closer to the second eretz, can be more powerful than what comes later in the previous pasuk of eretz, because the avodah b'zman hagolus has a great maila, a great superiority to the avodah there is b'zman shabbos and migdash kayim. This is the word that the Rebbe said. Cholav shri and chavivin. Correct. The last one. This is the Rebbe said. It's in Tafshinum Beis, in Chamishasa B'Shvat. Tafshinum Beis. It's a Meir de Gesicha, and what was unusual about that Sicha is when the Rebbe spoke the Sicha, the Rebbe spoke the entire Sicha with closed eyes, which was very unusual. The Rebbe Derech Klal only on Maimer said with closed eyes. At Kedei Kach, people thought that it was a Maimer Ken Sicha, but then it was a Meir de Gesicha. This word. Okay, let's go weiter in the Gemara.
In the order of preference is the Meister, right?
The story, yeah.
With one the Rebbeim, that they tested him to see his knowledge.
Okay, so tell us the story.
No, I'm just reminding you.
Okay.
I want to share it.
I don't know the story.
I heard that someone said that it was a loaf of bread and a piece of bread. And the Maisa was made a bracha on the piece of bread. And he says, he said,
Gesundheit? No.
He said, like, why did you make the bracha on the piece of bread? Why not the loaf of bread? He says, you didn't give me a knife. The loaf of bread was just there to test me. I wasn't supposed to eat it anyways.
Okay. Sagt the Gemara weiter, Itmar. We learned the following machlokes. He viu lifneihem te'enim va'anovim b'toich hasuda. If you brought figs and grapes to eat in the middle of a suda. So now the question is, do you have to make a bracha on them in the middle of a suda or not? Amar Rav Huna says, Tu'unim bracha lifneihem. You do have to make a bracha before you eat them, but ve'ein tu'unim bracha lachreim. But you don't have to make a bracha ala eitz after you eat them. You yaitz with the benching. Why do you have to make a bracha on them even though you're in the middle of a suda? So the reason is because it's not tuffle to the suda. You're not eating it as a secondary food together with the bread. You're eating it as something that you want to have a sweet taste in your mouth. It's a separate thing. Right?
Is there a difference between in the middle of a suda or as dessert?
It doesn't matter if it's in the middle or the end. That's what it says here. Even if it's in the middle of the suda, right? There is. Today it's more common that these things are served as a dessert before you bench. But in the middle of the suda is whether it's at the end or even if it's between the fish and the chicken, whatever it is, and you want to have something sweet in your mouth, it's not considered to be a tuffle to the bread, and therefore you have to make a separate bracha. But not an after bracha because that you yaitz with benching. That's one opinion. No. Anything that you're eating in the middle of the suda, which is for just for the purpose of having a sweet taste in your mouth, and not as a second chocolate, whatever it is, not as secondary to the suda. The same thing Rav Nachman said. You must make a bracha before, but not after your yaitz with benching. Rav Sheshes disagrees and says, you have to make a bracha both before you eat and after you eat, separately on it, and you're not yaitz with the benching. It's not related to the suda. Just as you make a bracha before, it deserves a bracha after. As we'll see soon, as he says there, there's nothing. There's nothing that if you make a bracha before, does not deserve a separate bracha on it afterwards. You can't be yaitz with the benching that you're benching on the bread. Ella, he says one exception. Pas haba bekisnin. Bread that comes in kisnin. There's many opinions about what the pshat of pas haba bekisnin is. Rashi says pas haba bekisnin is something that has flour in it, like pastry dough in it, but it's filled with all kinds of nuts and spices, and therefore most of it is not the pastry dough. Most of it is the nuts and the spices and other ingredients that are in it that give it a sharp taste. Elamai, since it has some pastry dough in it also, so you have to make a bracha on it as a mezainis. As we learned before, anything that has from the chameshes minei dagan, you have to make the bracha mezainis. But because it's not something where the mezainis is the ikr is the other nuts and the filling, whatever other things that it has in it, so therefore you don't have to make an ala michya on it. Right? So but you do have to make a bayir nefashis though. And Rashi actually says that this would be similar to rice. Even if you have to make a bracha mezainis on rice, according to the opinion that says you have to make bracha mezainis on rice, but you still don't make a alamichya on rice, you make a bracha of beir nefashis. If you remember, we had earlier on, regarding beir nefashis, the Gemara used the expression v'loi klum, that if you're not making an alamichya, you don't make any bracha at all after you eat, because as I mentioned then, they wouldn't make a beir nefashis in those days, only on like main foods of meat and eggs and things like that. So that's what it means over here, that it says that pasaba bekisnin, you have to make a bracha mezainis because of the pastry dough that's in it, but you don't make the after bracha. You don't make the alamichya afterwards. And Rashi over here says that then the minig was, after they finished the suda, they would eat this as a dessert, because Rashi says yafin luleif. This is something which is healthy for the heart, and this is what they would eat after they finished the suda. There are not an alamichya. Not an alamichya, but they made a beir nefashis. There are other opinions regarding this pasaba b'kisnin. There's a very big machlekes rishonim and a huge arichis in the Alter Rebbe, the Shulchan Aruch, what pasaba b'kisnin means. We'll talk about it more in Mitzvah tomorrow, where the Gemara discusses this more by arichis on Daf Mem Beis. Let's go weiter. What we said so far over here, Rav Hunner, Rav Nachman, Rav Sheishes, they all argue on what Rav Chia said. Rav Chia's opinion is, once you're eating bread, peteres kol minei meichel. Now you're exempt of making a bracha on any other foods that you're eating afterwards in the middle of the Suda. Regardless if it's secondary and part of the meal, or you're eating it just because you want to give yourself a sweet taste in the mouth, it makes no difference, it patters everything. It's not only because secondary. The bracha of Hamaitzi is so chashuv that once you make that bracha goes on everything that you eat following that. And he also said, V'yayin paita kol minei mashkin. If you make a bracha on wine, then any other beverages you drink, you'll be part of making a bracha. Which this is the halacha, that once you make a bracha on wine, any other drink following, you don't make any other bracha on, not the bracha of shahakal, and not the bracha chaleina, either of beir nefashis, you yaitze with halagefen. But what the Rab Chia over here said, that in the middle of the Suda, you don't have to make a bracha even if you're eating dessert or anything sweet, this argues, and all the Amiram before. So Rav Papa said, Hilchas, the final halacha is, things that you're eating during the Suda, but they're machmas Suda. They're part of the Suda of the bread that you're eating. They do not require not a bracha, not before and not after. But if you're eating it in the middle of the Suda, and it's not for the purpose of the Suda, it's just for a sweet taste in your mouth, but it's not part of the Suda of the bread that you're eating, that requires a bracha before you eat, but it does not require a bracha after you eat. You yaitz with the benching. Whatever you eat following the Suda, after you benched, that will require a bracha both before you eat and also after you eat. Because once you benched, so it's not tafel anymore to Yisuda, and you have to make a separate bracha before and after. Shalos ben Zayma, they asked the question to ben Zayma, mipnei ma omru, why was it said, dvaram abam machmas asuda b'toich asuda, that if you're eating things for the purpose of the Suda, in the middle of the Suda, einan tuna bracha loy lefneim v'loy lachrein, that it does not require a bracha not before and not after. What's the reason for this? Amalehem, so he answered them, hoyol upas petrosan, because the bread is the main primary food that you're eating and everything else is secondary, so it becomes potter with the bread that you eat. So now the question was asked to Ben Zayma, ihachi yayin nami niftere pas. If so, the same halacha should apply to one that drinks wine in the middle of the Suda. Why is the person drinking wine? Stamazah, he wouldn't have been drinking the wine. He's only drinking the wine along with the food. Any other beverages that you drink during a Suda, you don't make a separate bracha of shahakalan, because that's also considered to be secondary to the bread that you're eating in the meal. So why doesn't the same apply to the wine if the wine is only being eaten machmas Suda? So he answered, Shani yayin, wine is more choshev, yayin is separate. The gaidim bracha la'atzmai. We find that wine is gaidim a bracha for itself, and as Rashi explains over here, wine in many instances we drink separately, whether it's for kiddush, for avdallah, for sheva brachas, for all different kinds of cases. So we see that wine has a chshivas for itself, so even when you are drinking the wine as part of the Suda, and only for the purpose of the Suda, still wine deserves a bracha for itself. And that's the halacha. It is. No. The chiddush is wine is machmas Suda, but it still requires a bracha for itself mitzad its chshivas. That's the chiddush about the wine. Correct. Okay.
What about mashke?
No, doesn't say that. It doesn't say wine mashke is drunk on all occasions.
It is.
Some circles only.
Only the minute
After condition.
Oh, after Kiddush, then you don't make a bracha on the wine during the Suda because you already made that bracha on...
Everybody will do it.
Allah, no, everybody. No, everybody.
People say the haminim
No. If they were yaitza from the Mekadosh, they were yaitza Kiddush, they don't make a bracha themselves.